Hi there, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for this APMG International webinar on data-driven trends in change management. My name is Mark Constable. I'll be your host and moderator for the session, and it's a pleasure to be joined by regular presenter Melanie Franklin. So Melanie's a practitioner, consultant, trainer, mentor, all-round guru in change management, and today Melanie's going to be sharing some insights and results and findings from an annual survey of heads of change management and transformation. So there should be some interesting insights for today's session. And before we get into that detail, just let me cover a few bits of housekeeping. So the first point to note is we are recording the session, and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email once the recording's available online, so do look out for that follow-up email. Secondly, you're welcome to submit questions at any point throughout the session. I'll be keeping a close eye on those, and we'll try and address as many as we can towards the end. And last but not least, your feedback is very welcome. So positive or negative, that helps us to plan and deliver these webinars in the future. So any comments, gratefully received. So I think that's it for a quick intro from me. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Melanie for the main content. Over to you, Mel.
Thanks, Mark. Just one thing before I get started. I promise to advertise this everywhere I speak at the moment. I'm a judge at the UK Change Management Awards. So the Change Awards, you can see it's changeawards.co there. You can get hold of them at change-awards, or there's a QR code there. Basically, you know I'm a big fan of personal development, and there is nothing like putting an application in going, do you know what? I did some fantastic stuff last year. I've really moved to change forward. And just by going through the application process, I think it gives you an opportunity to bring together your, hey, I've done something really good, and you want to be recognised for it. You don't have to be a winner, you just have to apply, and you can always put that on your LinkedIn profile as well, entrant on the UK Change Awards. You know, so there is nothing to lose and everything to gain. They've made sure that the application process is as simple as possible, and they are helping lots of people to apply as well. So either nominate somebody or you can apply yourself, but please go and have a look. Take a photo of that QR code now if you want to, but please go and have a look. I would be very grateful. We don't start the judging for another month, so you've got plenty of opportunities to do it, and we're just looking for people who've, you know, at the end of the day, they put a lot of effort in, they've tried things out, that you're telling a great story. Basically, we're really interested in celebrating people like us who do a lot of change. The thing is, we tend not to be recognised because we're a bit behind the scenes, aren't we, nudging and encouraging others to change. And this is why Margot and the team put together the Change Awards. So I would love it if you could put an entry in. I think that would be fun. So let me get on to what's going on here. I run an organisation called Capability for Change Limited, and each year around September time, we go out to a specially invited group of directors of transformation, heads of change management, heads of change management offices, portfolio directors, basically people who are responsible within their organisation, and you might be some of them. We're going to do a quick poll in a moment. People who are responsible in their organisation for building that capability for change. We wanted to know, how's it going? We wanted to know what's happening in terms of change, and we want to do this every year. We're very interested in seeing whether or not now change management is becoming an established function, whether or not it's valued, whether people understand it, and whether or not we think that we are increasing our ability to do it. And what I'm going to share with you is the results from the September-October survey that we've just had. And I will make some conclusions as I've gone through all of the data hundreds of times. And if you know of a director of transformation or a head of change management, or if that's you that wants to be invited into this, then get hold of me. The reason it's invitation only is that what we need to do for a survey of this quality is to make sure that we get replies like for like. So there's no point me just putting out a link across LinkedIn, for example, and everybody can do it, because it might be somebody who's in a small team that's struggling with a particular change that they feel very impacted by it, or it might be somebody who's at the more senior level who's trying to decide, how do we fund, how do we resource, and how do we encourage change management in the wider picture. So we've gone for that invitation only at the senior level. How do you think the function of change management is doing in your organization? So if you know anybody, or if you are that person, get hold of me, because we are 6 months away from the next survey, and we're getting everybody ready in terms of the invitation list. Before I get going through some of the questions that we asked and how we did it and what the data tells us, Mark's going to put up a quick poll so I know who I'm talking to. That's the only reason. Just tell us really mainly what your role is all about.
Yeah, thanks. That poll's on screen for everybody now. So just looking for which of these three best describes your role. Not many sponsors on here.
Not many, or many?
Not many.
Not many.
So it's around 75% voted, 81% saying change manager. 16%.
81% of the audience who can go for the change awards then.
Sort of hovering around 15-16% for a manager impacted by change, and just 2 or 3% for sponsors.
Okay, well, welcome to the very small group of sponsors. It's lovely to have you here, and welcome to all our change managers and to those who are trying to manage themselves and their teams through change, to our line managers, our people managers. Okay, that gives me a bit of a hint of who I'm talking to here. The reason, very selfishly, that I paid thousands to make sure this survey goes out every year is because I need the data. Many of you who know me know that I'm standing in boardrooms a lot of the time advocating for taking change management more seriously. And I'm very well aware that whilst I can put together quite a compelling story, anecdotally, I wanted the data to back it up. So I wanted figures, and that's what I'm going to take you through now. And I hope you benefit from seeing some of these as much as I have benefited. It's strengthened my argument, let's put it that way. So this one, first of all, why are we developing the capability and change? Why in your organizations? This went out to all those heads of practice, heads of transformation, heads of change. And we said to you, why are you developing the capability and change? And I thought it was very interesting that it was all about accelerating the realization of benefits, because I think that does reflect the pressure that we're under. And also the second highest was the ability to manage changing internal priorities. Well, doesn't that tell us something, hey, about how internally focused we are, that we've got so much change going on inside our organizations. We need to invest in change management to help us cope with that. Not that we're looking outside at all the pressures and the competitive pressures, the social pressures, the technological pressures, and going, what do our customers need? We're using change management to try and sort out the internal mess that we've created. So I thought that was really interesting. But the other thing I would say is that when I have a look at this, and you'll see later on that I think we're still a profession in our infancy, and I think the figures will tell us that. I think if we were better at connecting the value of what we do to business objectives, then I think that the ones that are kind of low, like better respond to volatile market conditions and faster time to market for ideas and innovation, I think those two would be off the chart. I think that would be the driving reasons why we actually want to make change happen. They're not. They're quite low. And that means that I don't think we have won the argument internally yet. Hey, we are a valuable business service. So I think we've got quite a long way to go. This was a global survey, just to point this out. I chaired the UK's Change Management Institute for a number of years. I now chair the Continuous Change Community, which meets every month for free networking initiatives, and we did one last night where we had a fantastic session on one of the data points from here that I'll point out. But one of the things I was always interested in is that I was always told that Australia was sort of very high in terms of how it was doing in change management, and that then the UK was a bit behind Australia, and then the Americas were a bit behind the UK. Whether or not I subscribe to that view, what I wanted to make sure of is that we didn't just have a one country or one continent view. And I'm very grateful to our respondents for making sure that we were able to statistically come up with valuable insights from across the world. In terms of, you know, the size, what we had was that proportionally, if you look, the highest proportions were very much in more than half were under 5,000 staff, and then we had another 30% over the 20,000. And it's actually interesting that when you look through those numbers does not seem to be, in terms of number of employees, does not seem to be a determining factor in the data. It doesn't seem to matter how big or small you are, the issues still remain the same. You will see, though, as I go through some of the data, that there were differences in terms of the sector split. I'm not going to go through in detail quite a lot because that's something we've done for all the respondents, but we did notice that there were certain sectors that were particularly good or particularly bad at certain of these elements. So it was interesting that it was much more around the industry you were in and how good or bad you were at change management, not the size of your organisation, that made the difference. Also, I don't think anything of this is a surprise, that what we recognise is that actually the size of any kind of change management function, all very sort of low numbers. Again, it didn't matter how big your own organisation was or the industry or the geography. The majority of us are working within a very small team. And that centralised function is being called upon to support multiple changes, and of course there aren't enough of us to support all of the change initiatives that are taking place. And I think that's leading to this other piece, which is and I've been in the States for a couple of weeks doing some work, and I've just had a week back, and every single day I've been with clients where their orientation is, how do we build the ability to manage change in all of those non-change professionals, in our line managers particularly, because they're recognizing that whatever change management function they've got, it hardly scratches the surface. So I think increasingly we will see that there will be a small professional group, but there is an expectation that perhaps all staff are able to manage change. I'll be interested to see what happens this year when we look at that. In terms of the sorts of things that really jumped out at me here, we've always undertaken change initiatives to increase operational efficiencies, and there it is up the top again. But there are a few that really caught my attention for they weren't there. I thought that based on all of the hype and all of the hot air in the media, that increased focus on sustainability would be really close to the top, and we were quite shocked to see that it was closer to the bottom. That actually, while people talk a lot, they're not commissioning a lot of change initiatives around sustainability. Equally, there's been a lot of discussion, particularly after the impact of the invasion of Ukraine, around supply chain and the robustness of the supply chain and taking action to deal with that. But again, that was right down the bottom. We had increasing digitization as and that seems to be a theme ongoing with every client I talk to as well, which is that the reason we're changing is that we want to get the most out of what digital tools we already have. We want to keep going down that route, and of course closely aligned to that is increasing agility as well. But it was the ones that weren't high up that really caught my attention, to be honest. Now, how did we do the survey? Well, I've partnered with a company called Truth Sayers, because what I wanted to make sure of is that we were looking at this from a more neuroscientific perspective, not just look, a survey monkey, click on 1 to 5 every time. That wasn't going to give me, I thought, the robustness of the data that I needed to be able to make these arguments in the boardroom. So I'm going to explain how we've done it, really. And in that neuroscientific approach, what we've done is we ask the questions in different ways. So every question we ask in 2 different ways. You don't notice it because it's all mixed up. But what we're asking you is to think through. We get, if you like, your factual answer on the right-hand side. What do you think is actually happening? And then we ask a question in a very different way to find out how you feel about it. Do you really believe that that thing is happening? And you're going to see as we go through the data that there are differences. What tends to happen is that when we say we think something, we're able to call to mind evidence of some kind. It might be that that evidence is, oh yes, we've got a procedure for that, we've got a policy for that, we've got a method, oh, we do training courses in that. So our brain is going, yes, yes, that's good, we're doing very well on that, that's not a problem at all. And so we can sort of tick that off and we can think about it. And if that's all we had asked, then we would have got a very different sort of answers, if you like. As you're going to see, I'm going to compare both. What we wanted to ask is, how do you feel? So in order to do that, by the way, it's about cognitive dissonance. We prod you by making you answer a question yes or no. And if you really agree with it, if you feel that the answer truly is yes, you answer it very quickly. If, however, we've told you the answer must be yes, and you think, actually, no, that doesn't happen in my organization, I don't feel comfortable with that, your brain argues with you a lot, and therefore there's a very long time difference between you pressing the answer. And so we can see through those differences in time how you really feel. So that's what we've done here. Excuse me for the fact I'm losing my voice all over the place. What we did, we cut across, in terms of what we wanted to ask about, we cut across so many different maturity models, capability assessments in all sorts of different industries. We thought about, what does excellence look like in change management? I had an entire thought leadership panel working on this in 2022 to try and get the questions right, because of course what we want to do is always try to ask like for like questions year in, year out. So there's a lot of pressure to get this right. And we felt that these were the factors, and I'll take you through them, about how we thought that the world works in terms of change. We thought it was really important that we ask about our flexibility, our agility, in terms of, do we really understand the volume of change that we're commissioning? Are we really managing that volume of change? Which of course leads you on to, well, if you think you're managing that volume of change, have you got an approach? Have you got some kind of structured approach to managing it? If you're managing change, have you also got a process for by which you adopt it so that it goes into operational use? We wanted to check that what we were adopting and the things that we're doing are actually aligned to our strategic objectives. We wanted to ask about whether or not we're building a capability for change, and whether or not we see that that's increasing. And then finally, we wanted to know, are we able to cope with the adversity around change? So those are the things that we're coming to sort of deal with, if you like. Let's have a look at some of the key statistics and see if we can sort of take you through this. I haven't got, I'm going to do a cut down version of this, but anytime you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to sort of answer them. So the first thing that we did was, when we looked at the approach, and obviously we mixed up all of these questions so that in no way did you could predict what was coming up next. I thought the things here, you can see already that my organization believes managing change is important. Actually, we felt that was stronger, around about 73%. We do feel that our organizations think change is important, but actually the evidence for whether or not we think that's true simply wasn't there. It's less there than how we feel about it. So there was a bit of a difference, if you like. Why is that the case? Well, certainly we hypothesize that the people that are answering this, they do feel that their organization believes change is important because they actually exist, their role exists. So they are the personification of that importance, aren't they? Because they're heads of change and transformation. So they might feel it more than there being other evidence within the organization. What worried me actually on this one is the middle one. The activities to manage change are known. That we think that maybe about half of us think that that's true, possibly because we're calling to mind that we have impact assessments and readiness assessments, and we do training on change management. But 4 in 10 of us feel that is the case. So what we actually do is not really understood. And when you look around that, you think, well, actually, are we reviewing the effectiveness of what we do? Only about half of us are. Are we even tracking that our approach is followed? Well, about 3 in 10 of us think that we're doing that. So it's not a surprise that if we're not tracking whether our approach is followed, that the activities to manage change are known are really low. So this slide here makes me think, good grief, are we taking quite a cavalier attitude to this professional discipline? Change is a management discipline. And I just kind of look at these figures and think, wow, we've got a long way to go. You know, we don't even do something as simple as updating our change activities with lessons learned from each of our change initiatives. I mean, the numbers across the board actually were incredibly low. That my organisation believes managing change is important at 73% was, I think, the highest figure across the board. So I think you're going to find me saying throughout this afternoon that I don't think we could claim, based on these survey results, that change management is yet a slick operation anywhere. And we've got a very long road to travel. Yeah. But certainly this one bothers me because it seems to me that we're not getting our message out there about what are the activities needed to manage change, and we're not doing some good housekeeping to even embed those. Certainly, I mean, I've been working with a wide variety of clients in the last week alone, and I would say that the activities to manage change are simply not known. I've spent all day today working with a group of change professionals trying to articulate what is every single activity, every single technique that we might need to use as we work through the transition curve. Have you got that comprehensive understanding? You're not going to use every technique or every activity on every change, but have you got that comprehensive playbook of how you do change? No. And I mean, obviously the clients I work with are going to say no, because otherwise they wouldn't have hired me. But even so, it feels like we've got a long way to go. When it comes to the capability, I thought there are a few things in here. Responsibility for change is shared between staff and managers. No, we don't really feel that's true. So at the end of the day, you know, there's that burden on people. It's not a shared activity. Actually, the people who have to do the change are sort of, it's impacting them. Senior leaders being held accountable for building change management skills. We feel we're doing that, but actually the evidence isn't there at all. Only about a third of us feel there's some evidence for that. And actually look at those awful numbers about we develop change management skills in our people. You know, 4 in 10 think we're actually doing that. Now, probably a lot of us on this call have done things like the APMG's change management practitioner qualification. Well, that's great as us as change professionals, but what about everybody else? What is it that we're doing? I spend my life hosting I do a whole load of online work so that people around the world can just tap into these little neuro hacks about how to manage themselves through the change curve, simply because I'm trying to, you know, add to their capability and enable them to keep their heads above water. But clearly we don't think that's going particularly well. There's a few things in here. We said earlier on the approach, if I just go back to it, the activities to manage change are known, 40%, 4 in 10 of us think that's true. Down the bottom here, 3 in 10 of us think the skills for change management are known and respected. Yeah, we've got a problem, haven't we? We really haven't been explicit enough. I mean, tell me if you disagree with my interpretation of the results. Put your thoughts in the chat and Mark will interrupt me and share what you're thinking. But everything that I'm reading points me to the we've got a long way to go kind of argument. When it comes to the adoption, we didn't ask many questions on this because we know that this is at the back end of the change, and but we thought there was some very interesting things. Each change builds on the previous change. We were very interested to see if there was really a cohesive picture, whether we think actually what we do then adds to the next change and the next change, or are we constantly going off at tangents? The scores, you know, they weren't that high. I think, again, are we doing too much change that's disassociated from itself? I mean, are we all of these independent initiatives, because if that's the case, it's making people very confused. The lowest one of all. Oh my God. It's not the lowest score, by the way. I'll show you that in a while. But 2 out of 10 of us think that we're measuring the benefits achieved from change. Wow. Well, again, it goes back, doesn't it, to how can we say that we're a valued management discipline, a valued profession, if we're not if we don't measure what we've achieved and we don't then share that out and say, without us, we wouldn't be achieving this business value. If only 2 out of 10 of us are actually measuring it, there's something seriously wrong. And again, we add a different question, which is, do we think that change has added value? Again, 3 out of 10 of us seem to think that's the case. Wow. I mean, I was not expecting these numbers to be so low. So I think we've got a whole piece to do about working out what difference have our changes made, being upfront before we get started on them. What difference do we think it's going to make? What would be all the indicators that would tell us that we were making that difference? Let's brainstorm all of those, and then let's track them. Let's measure what it is now and measure what it is in the future. This isn't difficult stuff, but I think what holds all of us back from doing it is that it's not a one-for-one relationship. There are so many factors that would indicate customer satisfaction has gone up, for example, that we feel uncomfortable claiming a success for one particular change initiative when we think, oh, but there are so many other changes that might also have contributed to it. I think I'm coming to the opinion now we need to cut through all of that and say, if my change is in some way changing the customer experience, what is the rating of the customer experience right now? And what is it 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months after this change took place? And I will claim those results. Yes, I accept other factors might have been at play, but I think those are measures that I should be bringing in. So a lot of work to do on the measures side as well. However, we thought when we looked through the data there was a glimmer of hope, because there were a number of supplementary questions that sat behind some of these. And we thought, well, are we what is it that we're measuring for those of us who are measuring? And what excited us about this is that completed on time, completed on budget were there. But as we all know, those are measures of the tangible change. They are measures of the project. Did the project deliver on time? Did the project deliver to budget? What difference taking somebody through the transition curve to new ways of working, what difference that makes is, are people actually adopting the new ways of working? And we were pleased to see that 3/4 of us thought that that was the way in which we measure our change initiative. So I thought that was helpful. Yeah. So that's an important one. The one about delivering value set out in the business case. I'm not sure that that's specific enough for me, but people adopt the new ways of working. That got me excited. When it came to resilience, actually right down the bottom there is the reason that the continuous change community held an event on this. We held an event last night about what specifically can we do for those who are struggling with the change so that we make them feel more supported. Because 18% is the lowest figure we had across the board, and it is horrendous that we really are losing so many people as we go through change. We're not giving people the support when we know that it is a stressful time. So I kind of get depressed about the fact that we've got a long way to go. It was a great session last night because we talked about not how we as change professionals need to support people who are falling off the wagon, but actually how we empower their leaders to support them at the point of need at that local level. So I really liked a lot of the coaching answers that group came up with last night. I thought it was fantastic. If you want the write-up for that, you need to join the Continuous Change community on LinkedIn, and you'll see it gets posted early next week. We never video these things, we only do the write-up. The other thing that I think we could do that's relatively simple stuff is that we acknowledge and celebrate achievements. We think we're doing that, so we must have some processes in in place for us to have ever sort of said, yes, actually, oh, yes, we do that. But we feel, well, only 2 in 10 of us feel that we're actually doing that. So that's incredibly low number. So is it that we don't feel it's making a difference, or we're not making enough of an impact with it? So I would encourage you to have a really serious think. Are you in an organization where there's so much change going on that what happens is you do the change and then you go, right, what's next? And off you go. I know I'm guilty of it. Rather than actually maybe identifying what the new baseline is, congratulating everybody for how far they've come. And of course, by saying we acknowledge and celebrate achievements, I need to go back to the fact that, again, about 2 in 10 of us actually measure the benefits achieved from the change. Hard to celebrate the achievements if you haven't measured the benefits. So I think there is a big causal link here and that's letting us down, because it means that in terms of the value of change management as a function, I don't think we're sort of people are sort of seeing what it is that we do. So if I go back to are the activities to manage change known, and here skills for change management known and respected. Well, if we don't connect what we do to achieving benefits, and if we don't then of course celebrate those benefits, then we're not squaring the circle in terms of what we do is a valuable service for the business. So I don't think these figures are particularly a surprise. I think there's a lot of links between them. I think there's some other things in here around, are we talking openly about the pressures of change? And do people feel empowered to get things done? About half of us feel that we are. There is so much in terms of, there is so much pressure of change. I think that we should be able to get that up to 100%, that it should be normal that people can talk about the fact that they are under a lot of pressure. Because again, those who struggle to change feel supported. Well, if we're not talking about the pressures of change enough, then that figure will always be quite low, because people don't feel heard. And that's the first step in being supported, isn't it? So I think there's something we can do, asking people, being much more explicit, and getting people to ask in every team meeting and escalating up that actually my team feel incredibly under pressure with the volume of change that's coming their way. I think we could do more about talking about that. I thought it was interesting about feeling empowered, and there's another question about the poor speed of decision making. I think when we dived under the data, we found that there were multiple layers of escalation, and that was getting in the way of people feeling empowered to get things done, an expectation that they have to get a lot of change done, but just not feeling that they're able to do it. Leaders role modeling changes, though. Interesting that we feel we're seeing that right at the top there, but there's less than half of us think that we've got processes or procedures or something in place. So is it that we've got leaders who are actually walking the talk, but we haven't put anything fundamental in place to make sure that that's more of a norm? So have we got some work to do there, perhaps on coaching in storytelling and role modeling, that helps that become more of a norm? It's great that we feel it's being done, but I'd like to see the think it's being done at the same level, ideally. Any questions in the chat, Mark? You haven't interrupted me, so I'm keeping going. Hopefully I'm not sort of driving people nuts here.
There are a few bits, but yeah, it's a few sort of expressing surprise that only half measure value.
Yeah.
But I think the other questions are relevant towards the end.
Yeah, half measure value is terrifying, really, isn't it? We're getting in agility. I think a lot of these questions are sort of go back to portfolio management in a way, and overall impact assessment, and they are all low. Not one of them's over, in terms of how we feel, not one of them's over 50%, which is kind of scary. There's a few things I'm going to pull out here. my organization effectively optimizes its change portfolio down the bottom. 3 in 10 of us think that's the truth. Changes are prioritized in my organization. 3 in 10 of us thinks that's the truth. Wow. It's a bit worrying, really, isn't it? And in fact, I'm just going to go on to alignment, which is alignment back to strategy. This is what got us really interested. So we had to dive underneath the data quite a lot when we had a look at this. When it said changes aligned to company strategy, we actually felt that that was quite a strong score. And that people believe in the need for change. There's an overall recognition that we should be changing. So it looks like strategically we're perhaps doing things that are the right things, but what we're not doing is we're not getting into prioritizing the changes or doing the right change. You know, we're doing the right changes, but maybe not the right volume of change. So we've got the direction right, we've got the alignment to the strategic objectives. Yes, we should be changing these things. That is to be celebrated. But what we haven't yet got a handle on is changes are prioritized and my organization effectively optimizes its change portfolio. So the smart decision making around the kind of changes that we do, it's not there. That bothers me. I just don't. I think that we've got a way to go there. So yeah, we're doing the right changes, but actually, what we need to get into is how we're managing the volume. And I'm often with groups who are saying that it's that lack of prioritization at the senior level when people could step in and go, "There's too much on here." They're just not doing it. And I go to the top of this one now and say that less than half of us feel that the cumulative workload of multiple changes is tracked. In other words, when it comes to impact assessment, and I'm sure a number of you feel the same way, we will do an impact assessment for an individual change initiative. We will ask, oh, what needs to change? So do we need to change processes? Do we need to change roles or data? So we dig into the impact of a specific change. We even try and heat map sometimes when those changes are going to have to happen so we can let the teams know when they're going to be particularly impacted. But what we're not then doing across every change initiative is rolling that up so that we get a picture that says, right, you know, before Easter of this year, in March of this year, we've got all of these changes that seem to go live all before the end of Q1. Is that realistic? How on earth will people have any chance of doing business as usual, the day job, if we have all of these changes going live simultaneously? So the cumulative workload isn't recognised. And therefore, you know, maybe my organisation anticipates and plans for change isn't sort of going to be a particularly high number either. So we're just not working out what the overall impact is. And when it comes back to then another figure that we want to have a look at this. People have the time to adopt new ways of working. 38%. We don't feel that we've got the time to do all the change we've got to do. So there is definitely, across all of these factors, there is definitely a theme here around there's a volume problem. Because we just don't feel we've got the time to get it all done. And in fact, if I go back, oops, I've gone back the wrong way. So people have time to adopt new ways of working. And what is it? People feel we should struggle, cumulative workload. And then here, our level of change is manageable, 4 in 10 down the bottom there. So maybe we're doing the right changes, but we are not getting the right volume. We're not prioritizing our changes. We're not prioritizing our portfolio, and we don't feel that the level of change is manageable. Well, funnily enough, how would we feel the level of change is manageable if the cumulative workload of multiple changes isn't tracked? You know, it's going to be a surprise. Yeah. And I think connecting all of that is that we're missing a trick. Changes are not assessed for interdependencies, duplications, and omissions. and therefore we're doing a lot. This is the thing that I came to when I went through all the data, and I didn't want to be able to say this about my profession, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to, which is that this data indicates to me that we're still being busy fools. We're being very, very active. We're doing a lot of change, but we're not putting in place the kind of approach and procedures that would make sure we're doing the right change. So we've got a volume issue, we've got a prioritization issue, not an alignment issue, but we've definitely got a volume issue. And therefore, we've got also people who are really suffering. So when it comes down to that change fatigue, if you like, going back to this, our level of change is manageable. 4 in 10 think that that's actually true. And I'm sure, I'm absolutely sure that the numbers are going to go down. It was very interesting when we did one of the data points in the survey. We asked you about the volume of change that was happening. In 2019, just before the pandemic, Gartner did one of their global surveys with their chief HR officers, about 6,500 of them. And what they said was that in the previous 3 years, their organizations had done at least 5 firm-wide initiatives, firm-wide changes, and that 75% of them felt that this number was going to go up, that the volume was going to increase. Now, COVID then hit. When I was chairing the Change Management Institute, we've done 2 surveys at the beginning of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. And in 2021, we got a lot of respondents talking about the pent-up demand for changes. People had to crisis react to COVID and therefore put an awful lot of their transformations on hold. But as we were coming into 2021, almost a year later, they're going, right, okay, we need to get back to some of those more strategic things. So they felt the volume was going to climb, and we saw that again at the beginning of 2022. And I'm sure when we ask again this year, we're going to see the same thing. And when we asked on this survey about the volume of change, whether or not it was you thought it was going to increase in the next year or decrease, what we had was 89% of you said that it was going to increase, 11% of you said it was going to stay the same, and 0% said it was going to get less. So if these figures are low now, our level of change is manageable, and that we're not, if we don't step in now and start doing that prioritization, changes are prioritized in my organization effectively optimizes its change portfolio, my organization anticipates and plans for changes are assessed for interdependencies, duplications and emissions, the cumulative workload of multiple changes is tracked. If we don't start doing some of these things, then the situation is going to be even worse in the next survey, and that is the one that frightens me. So I think that there are some things, some easy things we're not doing. As I called out before, we're not supporting people who are struggling with change. We're not celebrating our achievements. We're not measuring the benefits and therefore establishing ourselves as a valuable and to be taken seriously management discipline. And we're not prioritizing our work and managing the volume. All of these things strike me as kind of worrying, and that's where I conclude that, as I said, I don't think we're yet a slick operation. It just feels that professionally, I feel like we're in our infancy. I don't know about you, but can you imagine if we were asking another professional discipline within any of our organisations about how they were doing things? Would their numbers be as low as these numbers? If I asked the marketing or the finance functions about how they do things, would they really be answering questions with sort of 18% answers, 23% answers? So I think these are the things that I'm most worried about.
Mel,
as I said,
Mel,
yeah.
There's a good question linked to what you just mentioned there. So what is your view that change should be a profession and or cross-government function? Change is often swept under 3PM, which I guess is project program portfolio management, despite most change bodies suggesting it's an afterthought in PPM.
It's terrifying, isn't it? I'm old, so I remember when we had, oh, I don't know which revision of the Managing Successful Programs thing we did in the UK, because I remember I had to write the book Think MSP, which was an accompaniment to the big textbook, which was sort of all the practical templates for doing MSP. And I remember that we had said, as part of program management, managing multiple interdependent projects, guys, that not only should we, have a project management method for each of the projects, the tangible change, but we also referred to pre, during, and post transition activities. And at that point, APMG, the exam board, picked up on the fact that actually we were not focusing enough on change management, and they brought out the change management practitioner certificate with the original textbook on making sense of change management. And I felt very encouraged by that, because I always thought that that was a missing link. What I'm worried about is that more than 15 years later, here I am with these figures for you. So this is what I mean about we're still in our infancy. I think if you want to take action about this, if you want to do something about it, I think that, and in fact, I put a few things up here, build a more detailed picture of what change management really involves. Very simply, I think we can all contribute to this by circulating in our organisations a blow-by-blow account of all of the activities and techniques that we use to help people make that transition from this is their current way of working to this is how they're going to work in the future. The more explicit we are, showing that actually those activities take up a lot of resource, they take up a lot of time, they take up a lot of somebody like us chivying people, nudging people through it, but also that it has a massive impact on people within the business who are actually trying to make that transition. The more explicit we can be, the more we are likely to be seen as, oh, there's quite a lot of work involved here. Now, that's one aspect. So I think we have to win the argument, this is all the work that we do. But the other thing we've got to do, it's really simple, is we cannot get involved in any change where we don't stop ourselves and go, hang on, what will be the upside of doing this? What improvement should we see if we go and actually get this change to become the new normal way of working? What would be the upside? What would be the improvement? How would we measure that? How will we know if we're done? And it doesn't have to be rocket science, but as soon as we get some measures, we need to be measuring them. I need to be able to say, as a result of all of this work that I've just explained to you we have to do, so here's that massive amount of work that we have to do. This is what change looks like. This is what we achieved. Without all of this work, we wouldn't have got this benefit. And when I hear people, and I was with a group today, when I hear people where they talk about separate benefits management groups or the benefits manager, I just want to scream. We're idiots. We in the change management profession shouldn't be allowing benefits management to be its own discipline. This is what we deliver. We are the secret sauce that, as a result of what we do, organizations get the efficiency benefits, they get the value add benefits, they get the cost reduction benefits, the revenue increase benefits as a result of what we do. And yet, for some reason, we're so busy doing it, we forget to tell people, wow, this is what we achieved. So that's my answer. Identify blow by blow account of all the work that we actually do. And the second thing is, don't allow any initiative to come past your desk if it hasn't answered the question, what's the upside? What improvement will we see? And at least one measure that we are going to take. If you want to do more on this, I do an entire workshop on how we find, because I think a lot of people worry about the implicit improvements that we create. And my job these days in terms of benefits is turning those implicit, we've increased efficiency, and I roll it back to a whole load of explicit measures. How would we know we've increased confidence in people? Well, they ask less questions, they're more able to get on with things faster without requiring more support. I mean, I just break everything down into explicit statements that we could check that, we could measure that. ultimately that's what we're going to have to do. So I think build a more detailed picture of what we do. Make sure we're measuring those benefits. I think we should do basic things like celebrate our successes. And of course, if we don't measure things, it's going to be hard to do that. Be practical. I think with all of these things, the best chance you have of doing any of it is to hook it to the next change initiative that's coming your way, because you know what it's like at the beginning. There's a flurry of excitement and availability of resources, and there's an interest in planning things. That's your best chance to get in there and go, hey, have I got a comprehensive plan of change activities for you? I put out something on LinkedIn about a week ago because I was getting so many questions about it. It was a paper I'd written about integrating the project and the change plans, because there are always going to be project plans. Let's just add our stuff to that. Let's make a comprehensive plan of both the tangible and the behavioural change that leads to the benefits. That way, there's somebody, a responsible project management role somewhere that's going to be creating that plan. Let's just give them a pre-packaged, hey, and here are all the change management activities we need to add to that. I mean, they'll go pale and they'll be extremely worried because it looks like a huge amount of work. But hey, we've got it up there then, haven't we? It's going to get in front of the sponsor, as opposed to turning it into some kind of a separate meeting and separate engagement with the sponsor. Let's just give them the whole big plan in one big heap and get them excited about it. Does that help, Mark? Does that indicated that some of these, I've answered the question?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few comments sort of in alignment with what you've said, certainly.
Well, you know that I'm enthusiastic, guys. I just want us to be more professional. And the reason I did this data is because there it is. It's sitting here right now. I'm sure some of you have written down some of these key percentages that you can quote from that just say, wow, we've got a lot more that we should be doing. There's loads of figures here. You know, we're not even talking openly about the pressures of change. Those who struggle to change feel supported, 18%. There's loads of numbers here, any one of which you could pick up and run with with your own senior leaders and go, I was on this presentation last night and this feels like we are in the same boat. As well as making sure your organisation signs up for the survey for 2023, so you get all the detailed data behind the scenes and everything from an industry sort of breakdown. That would definitely be worth doing, because I think you'll find that really helpful. Because I'm doing this as a service for all of us to make sure we can be. It's all part of my drive for professionalism, because I wanted to give us data we could use. In a more data-driven environment, if we only talk anecdotally about how important we are or how good we are or what is happening in organizations, I don't think we get the attention we need. So I've given us the data. So I think you can start to have a more statistically driven conversation about change management. So I hope this is helping you as much as it helps me. But take part, get your organizations to take part, and you'll get a more detailed breakdown in only 6 months' time as well. So that's about me really, Mark. I'm 5 minutes off the end. So any questions anybody else wants to ask me, I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I think we can squeeze a few in.
Yeah, go on then.
Really insightful stuff. Like some alarming numbers there for sure. Right, so let's start with.
If I'd have known it was going to be that bad, would I ever have done it? Yeah. That's a question I ask myself sometimes.
Kind of follows on nicely from your sort of next step. So what are simple quick grab strategies you'd recommend for independent change practitioners managing single programs projects but are in a position to influence the leaders in those organizations on the subject of change volumes and portfolio alignment?
I think in terms of portfolio alignment, I mean, I think the simplest thing I can get you guys to do is to make sure that you can sort of say, well, where does this change fit into the other changes? It's a really simple question, and you can look at the portfolio and come up with your own draft ideas that you then put in front of the sponsor. The reason I say that's so impactful is I sit there talking to them about, well, where does this fit in? And I play a bit dumb. And they have a moment of realization sometimes that actually it doesn't seem to link to anything else they're doing. It's going off at a bit of a tangent. Or the other moment of discovery they have is, ooh, this kind of duplicates the scope of other things we're already doing. And you go, maybe we should take some of the scope out if it's going to step on the toes of things that are already in train. So I think you can very gently, very elegantly, and still keep your job, have a conversation with sponsors where you just play dumb and you go, well, where do you think? I've had a look at the portfolio, I've had a look at other changes that are happening. Obviously, I'm your voice when it comes to talking to all the staff impacted by change. And I know they want to know, how does this fit in with other changes they're currently making? This was my sort of view of how it fits in. What do you think? And you're leading them down the path for them to have that moment of, this is either going off at a tangent and going to confuse the hell out of those who are going to be affected by it. So it looks like we're almost doing a U-turn, or wow, this looks like we're duplicating something they're already doing and we're going to look like idiots. But either way, I think you can get in pretty early with that kind of conversation. Definitely worth it.
Great, thanks, Mel. So do you think the driver of these low numbers is due to organisation culture and legacy perception of change, or the capability of change professionals and the content of some change certification syllabus?
I think we just haven't won the fight. I think there are loads of talented individuals who are doing change, but perhaps I think certainly my engagement with thousands of you, because I meet so many of you all of the time on various events that I do. And I think what I see is that we're all working very, very hard for individual change initiatives. There probably in any organisation aren't enough of us to feel like we form a powerful lobbying group. And so I think sometimes the argument gets lost because we make the argument about the value of change management to our project and programme managers in a particular initiative we're dealing with, or with a particular sponsor. But the messages we're getting across and the success we're having is within that bubble, but we're not breaking through that bubble into a more executive level. And I think that's where we start to see some of those issues around a lack of prioritisation of the portfolio, because we're not able to break through. So I think we're doing our best, but I think we need to maybe start to come together in the organisation and be a bit more of a powerful lobbying group. And therefore, one of my best friends in any organisation is going to be the head of portfolio management or the heads of the strategy office. I want to make sure that any change management function is actually connecting the dots with some of those other functions that might already have got the strategic ear that perhaps we need. So always build on what already exists is my answer.
Great, thanks, Mel. One final question, just looking at the time, and it ties up well with what we've got on screen here. Just lost it for a second. There we go. So there are a lot of change management courses. However, I find organisations use lean or agile more than change management itself. How do we know what skills teams should be learning?
I think the reason I wrote the Agile Change courses was that I felt that Agile is still an incredibly important thing, and we saw that on the stats in the early slides. And therefore, the reason that I think the Agile Change qualification is so helpful is because it's almost like it gives you a relevance. It's almost like it's your entry, it's your your pass, that you know what you're talking about. You can put change into that agile context that so many organizations want to have. So in other words, instead of just being I'm a change professional, you've actually got that extra badge that says, hey, I understand agile, I understand how if I'm going to do any work on change for you, don't worry, I'm going to do it in this agile way. I'm not going to be going against what you're trying to put in place. You can rely on me. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to agile. And in fact, I've just had some very senior leaders talking to me about how what they really loved about the Agile Change Agent course they went on is that it was not methodological, that what I was cutting through was I was talking about the behaviours and what what's really at the heart of Agile is very much an emergent approach, and how to create a roadmap of a change initiative wave by wave or iteration by iteration. They said what they loved about it was, it was just so practical, and it wasn't sort of forcing them to learn a whole load of new language that some of these Agile methodologies do, because they said, well, that doesn't get the job done. So I think an Agile change perspective is always going to be a good idea. That's why we put it in place. That's why APMG have got this in their portfolio, is because we're trying to give you qualifications that we know are incredibly relevant, and there's thousands of you have taken it already. So join the others.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mel. That's takes us nicely to the end, so we'll have to wrap up there. Just creeping over the hour.
Oh yeah, right. It's time for me to go and have a glass of champagne, because I think that's the only thing that will solve my sore throat. I know some people use Sudafed and things like that, but I'm thinking that a glass of champagne will be the way forward.
Yeah, thoroughly deserved.
Thank you, guys.
So all I'll do at this point now is just remind everyone that we have recorded the session, and as soon as we've got that online and available, we'll send a follow-up email to everyone, which will link to that recording, and also a few other bits that we've linked in the that we've talked about here, like the change management course. And I know Mel loves a bit of interaction on LinkedIn, so we'll link to Melanie there as well.
You can talk to me at any time. Yeah, and I'll get you into the continuous change community as well, because it's a free networking group and you can be amongst your own kind. So that would be good.
Lovely. Okay, so thank you very much everyone for attending. Thank you for the interaction, questions, and completing the poll for us. And thank you, Melanie, as ever, for your insights and expertise and really eye-opening figures there.
Thank you. I'll see you for lunch in 7 weeks, Mark.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Take care, darling.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the weekend when it comes.
Thanks. Bye.